Okay, so we come to part of our APCM about looking ahead. We've already touched on this subject, and I wanted to touch on it again. Back in March, the PCC had a day together which we called The Future of St. Faith's. And it was an initial conversation amongst the PCC, looking at where we are now and where we want to go in the future. And we started the day thinking about the things that are good in our church community now. And we came up with a long list of things. And in fact, over the last hour, we have looked at a load of things that are really good in our church community. Those things that we've thanked God for already about 2024. And so I don't need to tell you the list that the PCC came up with because we have looked at those. But the next question was this that we looked at on our PCC day. What might we be like in 10 years if we just carry on doing what we're doing? What might we be like in 10 years if we just carry on doing what we're doing? And these are some of the things that the PCC said in answer to that question. In 10 years' time, we are likely as a church to be smaller than we are now and older than we are now. We are likely to have fewer volunteers, less income. We are potentially likely to be less attractive to the wider community. And it's almost certain that some aspects of the things we do now would cease in 10 years' time. Those are the things the PCC said. And I just want to give you, we've already talked about the electoral roll today, I just want to give you this image, which is electoral roll numbers since the 1980s. And you can see that over time, not since kind of 1990 has the electoral roll been over 300 members, but this year we're on 206 or 5, I think it is, and we are the same as we were in about 2008. Now, the electoral roll is a funny thing because we've reset it this year, so as you know, it's a completely new roll. It will then go up in the coming years as new people join, and then it always goes back down again when we reset it. And that's what you can see in this period here. But it stayed kind of static in the last few years, but we've gone back down to about 205. That is way better than loads of Church of England churches. So we are still, in Church of England terms, a large church.
That also accounts for COVID time. We actually quite well thing.
Yes, so COVID is in that in those years as well. However, we know that if we look at our age profile, we are top heavy, one might say, with lovely, lovely older people. And we need to continue to do something about that. So the next question that the PCC asked was, what would be our dream for St. Faith's in 10 years' time? What would we love St. Faith's to be like in a decade? And the kind of words that the PC said were this: vitality, integrity, an inclusive community, celebratory, spiritually growing, a congregation that's more representative of Lee as a town, younger, more dynamic, increased commitment across the whole community and not just some, an engaged young adult community, a discipled teen community, attractive service for all ages, vibrant faith in later life community, generous giving, spiritual wholeness, accessible and attractive community, and more integration with the wider Lee community. So those are some of the things that the PCC came up with. And I think that's a wonderful vision for the future, a wonderful dream. I would love St. Faith's to be like that in 10 years. And then we thought about some of the things we might do to get us from here to there. From where we are now to where we dream of being. We thought about our services and the different ministries that we have in St. Faith's that we've talked about already this afternoon. We did not make any major decisions in that gathering. That was an initial conversation. But the PCC will, in the coming months, be thinking more about all of those things. If that's the kind of dream we have for our church, what do we want to change? What needs to stay the same? What might we need to stop doing entirely so that we can do something different? Again, no decisions were made. This will be a process that the PCC will be thinking about in the coming months. But there are two particular things that I want to just tell you a little bit about now, so that you're aware of them when you hear about them in the future. And the first of those things is that there is a plan forming to move Sundays at 11 out of the church and into here, into the Bulson Hall. The kind of service that Sundays at 11 is, and a kind of informal gathering of all ages, is just more suited to this space than it is to the church. The acoustics are better, the setting is better for that kind of informal service. And the PCC were broadly in agreement with that as a sort of idea. However, we know that if we move Sundays at 11 into here, we will have to do Sunday mornings a bit differently. And especially the refreshments time between the parish Eucharist and Sundays at 11 wouldn't be in here, because this room would be being used for Sundays at 11. We know that this is a change, and we need to think about all the practicalities of how that might happen. But I just want you to know that we're thinking about that as a possible change for the future. But connected to that is the second thing I want to talk about. And that is, at the same time, we've begun as a PCC to talk about the possibility of replacing all the chairs in the church with more modern, comfortable seating. At the same time as doing that, we're thinking about doing something different at the back of the church, near the west doors. Not putting rows of seats there, but having nice tables and chairs and making that a refreshment area, which could be used for after the parish Eucharist and before Sundays at 11. Now, there are some churches, when you say, we're thinking about taking out the pews, that some people say, over my dead body, are you taking out those pews? I don't think in St. Faith's that there's anyone who's going to say, I just love those seats. We must hold on to them forever. But I might be wrong. You don't even sit in them.
I wasn't thinking about how wonderful and comfortable they are, but it does occur to me that with the chairs as they are in strips, it's very easy to move them.
Indeed it
And
is.
if you've got individual chairs,
Yes.
but they've got to be able to has to be, as long as you can lock them together in some way, which that's perfect.
Yes. So,
One at a time.
you'll burn them. So Joe's question was around, the fact is we might not love the current chairs, but they are easy to move because they're locked in rows. Yes, that is a factor, but at the PCC we had a conversation and a number of people said, oh yes, I know a church that's recently replaced their church with these chairs with these. I know a church that's recently replaced their church with these. So there are options out there for us. So I'm not looking to have a long conversation about the pros and cons of all that. That will happen at the PCC. I just want you to know that we are beginning to have that conversation about potentially replacing all the chairs in the church with something that is more modern, more comfortable. Beck?
The font. You going to mention that?
I wasn't. So Beck's just asked a question about the font. I wasn't going to mention that, but I sort of have to now, don't I? Thank you. What is it about my family at this service, at this meeting? As part of that conversation, we are also thinking about the font, because it takes up quite a lot of space at the back of the church. And if we were going to change that area into an area with tables and chairs for refreshments, it is in the way. Now, in the longer term, when we come to the big building project, that was also a factor. We might take the font out at that point. But we haven't made any decisions, but that is in the mix as well for that. So I just want to let you know that the PCC are thinking about these two particular things, moving Sundays at 11 into here, because it's a more appropriate venue for that kind of service, and also then replacing the chairs in the church and doing something different at the back of the church. One of the things I would love for the building project is to have a permanent kind of tea and coffee serving facility at the back of the church. And again, that might mean moving the font. But so that's all in the mix at the moment. And just so you know, there will be a time whenever we do the building work, and Mike's going to come and talk about the building development group in a moment, whenever we do the building work, we will all be out of the building, the church, for months. And everything will be happening in here. And that will be a change again. So whatever we do now at the back of the church will be temporary until we will see how it goes if we do it, and then incorporate that into the building project if we like it. So then, as well as thinking about those two concrete things, the PCC is going to carry on thinking about our dreams for the future, which actually absolutely goes back to Kevin's question earlier about growing the church community and the kind of church we want to be in 10 years' time, and the changes we might need to make now in order to take steps to get there. That's all I really wanted to say on that, but if you've got any questions, now is an opportunity to ask. Joe?
Again, only a very slight sort of spanner in the works. It just occurs to me, as a listed building, are we going to run into all sorts of faculty problems and so on with what we want to do?
So Joe's saying it's a listed building, are we going to run into faculty problems? We're not going to run into faculty problems, but we will run into faculties. So we have, even when the PCC agrees to make a change, let's say we want to replace all the chairs in the church, we will need to go and get permission to do that from the Church of England, from the diocesan structures. I don't perceive that will be an issue in the slightest, because our pews are not fixed, they've never been fixed, our chairs are not historic in any way, they are just the chairs that have always been here, so I don't perceive that will be an issue at all.
How long do faculties take at the moment?
How long does it take? Not that long.
Sort of weeks or months?
Months. Well, we would have to, the process would be the PCC would agree that they wanted to do this, if we wanted to do it. Then we would have to submit the faculty, and there would be a period of public consultation where people get to comment on it, and then If that goes smoothly, then the faculty will be granted and we can do it. One of the things I should say, I suppose, is that, I talked earlier about the money we've been given recently. I would not see that money going towards replacing the chairs. I think I would love to go to the congregation and basically say, would you like to buy a chair? It's not your chair. You don't get a plaque on it saying it's your chair. Absolutely not. But I think absolutely saying to us as a church community, would you like to contribute towards a chair, buy a chair? I think that would be a good way of doing it if we did it. Any other questions? Sarah?
Paul, am I right in thinking some time ago before Mike and I came here, money was left to put glass doors? Yes. Somewhere at the back
Yep.
of the church?
Yep.
Is that still, it's only then people can put in?
Yep. So Sarah's asked, so she's got a memory that some money was left to contribute towards putting some glass doors in the west doors of so in the west end of the church, so that people could look into the building. Yep, that money is still there, but that is a thing that needs to be incorporated into the building project. It's much harder. So replacing the chairs is relatively simple. They're not fixed. We just take them out and put new ones in. Doing something to the fabric of the building, like that at the doors at the back, will require being part of the wider building project.
So is that going to be?
Yeah, it's part of the building project. Yeah.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
I know my husband said I shouldn't, but I want to do.
You can, James.
Those glass doors are really into my head because we travelled all over the Isle of Wight, checking what the glass doors looked like.
Yep.
Went in the bus, and they look so lovely.
Yeah, no, but I don't disagree with you in any way. I agree with you. It would be great to have them, but it needs to be part of the wider building project, which we're going to get to in a moment. Margaret.
Can I just say that one of the problems that we came up against when we were looking for the glass doors was that there was parts of the coping, that's down there, and it was covering the wiring, so we wouldn't be able to do it. But the other thing was the font. The font is in the way of the door coming in.
Well, there you go. The font is in the way. Sorry? Well, we would put the idea is to put a sort of entrance vestibule. It would be on the inside probably rather than the outside, which is why the car park wouldn't be in the way, but the font would be. Peggy.
I just wanted to say that I moved here from a parish church, very old parish church, and we removed all the pews, and we had lovely comfortable seats, and we had some with arms on, which kept it.
Yes. So Peggy just said that she moved here from a very old parish church building, which took out all its pews, replaced with comfortable seats, and some of them had arms.
And we had trolleys that you could stack the chairs on, so
Yeah.
they were easy to move.
Yeah, and trolley stacks for the chairs, so that they're easy to move. Brilliant.
Oh yes, we moved the font as well.
And you moved the font as well. Peggy, would you like to join the PCC?
I've had 20 years of experience with that, and I'm retired.
Oh, right, that's right. Peggy said she had 20 years of experience on the PCC and she's now retired. Carolyn.
When I was at Denmead with John Herclots, and we had lots of work done,
Yes.
and we replaced the chairs, yes, we did exactly the same as you're proposing, asking people to buy them, but they were always in memory of somebody. So they have got plaques on them.
Okay, so when Carolyn was at Denmead with John Herclots many years ago, they did a major building work and replaced all their chairs, but they did have plaques on. They asked them to buy them in memory of people, which we can consider.
They can have one in memory of something.
Right, I'm conscious of the time. We said this meeting was going to end at 5 and it's gone 5, but we do now need to talk about the building project. So Mike is going to come and speak to us for a few minutes, tell us where we are. Your slides are there.
Hello. I shall try and keep it relatively brief, but there's some interesting things you might want to look at. But I wanted to update you to begin with, because last year I stood here and invited you all to take a survey, which you did brilliantly. Thank you so much. So I wanted to update you on what we found out by asking you all those questions. We also sent that survey out in the form of this leaflet that you might remember seeing around church to everybody in the parish in Lee. By Royal Mail Post, by also putting it, thank you Bridget, into the magazine that went out and all sorts of other places, including, if it works, we were on the Portsmouth News, on the websites, the various places that we tried to put our online survey under the noses of anybody who would want to take it. What did we find out? Well, 144 people took part, which we weren't very pleased with, let's just be honest. It wasn't as many as we'd hoped for, and 121 of those, that's 84%, were us here at St Faith's, and 95 of those were residents in Lee, and so the rest were people who lived outside of Lee. What does that tell us? It tells us that the people outside of our church, despite our efforts, maybe we could have tried a bit harder in other ways that I'm not aware of, but most people aren't very concerned with the state of our building, or particularly interested in having a say in its future. So I did produce a report for the Building Development Group, which I think went to PCC as well, which has got a lot of detail about some of the things I'm going to tell you. So if you're interested in really drilling down into the data and understanding it better, then please do ask me, and I'm sure we can share that report with you if you need to see it. Otherwise, this is just a brief whistle-stop tour of some of the key things. So, I don't know if you know, but our Building Development Group came up with 4 priorities for this project, and we wanted to just see how people were responding to those and which ones they felt were most important. And really, the 4 are things about the local people, so how do we change the building to better suit the needs of our local people, to update the building in terms of environmental impact, to maintain and adapt and make an adaptable worship space through in the church, and also to promote the heritage of the building. And so you can see how much people found those important or not. And it's clear that really making updates to what we've got and the facilities we've got are the most important, and also looking after our church space particularly. And it's obvious to see going in there that it needs some TLC. Now, we also asked people about that, okay, what things would they like to see done in the building? And so, without trying to get into the complicated of what all those different bars are, ultimately we found out that people really are keen for us to make the church space adaptable. They're keen for us to develop small meeting rooms, to create maybe a bit of a better office, and to upgrade the Bulson and Lowry facilities just to make them really work and sing well. So those were the kind of most important things that came out when we asked people. So essentially, what we're saying, when we look at the people of Lee, forgetting what we said, the few people that were not church people, but also the people, people that live in Lee are most interested in seeing us improving our existing spaces, not knocking down and starting again or doing anything too radical, but just really improving on what we've got. And particularly just making our large spaces work. And actually, if you look at that particular bar there, which has a big yellow peak on it, what that is telling us is that that's the difference between us and people outside. We're relatively comfortable with our facilities and what we've got, but people outside would like to see improved, bigger spaces, much more so than we would, it seems. And then, in terms of the church space, and we broke down a whole bunch of different things that you might be interested in, most of which are listed here, but not all. This just gives you some idea of what people said they were most interested in seeing something done towards in that space. So, acoustics and seating and paint, unsurprisingly, came out really, really top of those lists. We all want to see the church painted, don't we? Now, the reality of all this is that it's going to cost money. And it's not that straightforward, because we'd love to think, let's go out and raise all these grant funds from various bodies, and Brian talked a little bit about that previously. That's an ideal, and we'd love to be able to do that, and we are going to attempt to do some of that. However, we live in a relatively wealthy area, and the things that we actually want to fund are in sort of secular terms, religious activities. And those are things that are quite difficult to fund through grant funding. And even the environmental aspects of the things that we want to do, perhaps like solar panels or better insulation to improve the way that the building is heated and so on. Those things are not easily fundable through grant funds, and there are lots of churches out there with probably a bigger need to get some of these things done than we are. So if we're trying to find these kinds of funds, it might be quite difficult, which does mean that we're going to have, yes, some grant funding, but we're going to need to look for funds by looking in our own pockets, I guess. And the bit that you kind of all really want to see is, okay, so where have we got to with the project? And we have been talking to our architects, and one of our architect, Simon Goddard, is actually on the DAC, who are the people who deal with the faculties, basically. So he's the one giving us some advice and some ideas. So what I'm about to show you are a few ideas that he has presented to us. There's been a bit of backwards and forwards. These are just ideas. They're not things that are kind of settled by any means. And they're also big money, money no object type of dreams. They're the kind of things we might do if we really just set our targets, sort of sights right up there. It doesn't mean we're going to do everything that you're about to see, okay? And incidentally, we are continuing to show these ideas to people. We are consulting, and we've been running a series of focus groups from different congregations, and we'll look at that in a minute. Just here we go. So this is a picture of the church that we've been sent by Simon. So normally we're coming into church here, okay, here's the altar, okay, and we're sitting here right now. And what the architect is ultimately suggesting is making changes around here, okay, which is out there. So essentially to make a bigger entrance and lobby space, partly just to make the building a more coherent single space that's more welcoming. So as you come in the entrance, there'll be a new office next to the kitchen. Okay, that frees up the office space down here for something else. That's an idea. And it also means that we can come into church this way. Instead of this way, like we often do, we'll be able to come in this way. This is a whole new cut through. Okay? This number 10 and 11, where we'll be storing all of our chairs when we want to get them out of the way. And you see the gap between the buildings has kind of been taken up by stuff. So instead of having airspace between the buildings, we might actually have some building between the buildings, if that makes sense. And then flipping the loose to the other side and just generally making this lobby space bigger. So that there's a much bigger entranceway so that we can direct people, and the flow of the building works better this way. Again, this is an idea of the architects, something we're considering. Along with that is some alterations to the roof and the size of the Lowry. This diagram perhaps isn't the perfect one, but we've talked about possibly extending it even just a little bit further. We don't know yet, it's thoughts and ideas. So yeah, new main entrance, new office area and reception. Rearranging the toilets and the corridors to allow us to flow through, and a slightly bigger Lowry room since people were asking for improved bigger spaces. So, like I mentioned, we're talking to focus groups, so we have been showing these ideas to you guys, and we're continuing to do so. So we've had a chat with the APCM folks, we've had a chat with a group from Parish Eucharist, not everybody, but we've gathered a select group of people together to see what people thought of these ideas. We're yet to do Sundays at 11, although I believe there's a date in the diary, and we're thinking that we might need to talk to regular hall hirers, as well as a couple of other focus groups, just to talk these through. So what are our next steps? Well, we need to complete those focus groups just to really hear what people are saying and thinking about these ideas. We need to present any recommendations that come out of that to the PCC, and then we'll create some kind of costed, phased plan with the architects. This is not something we can do all in one big go, so we'd need to think about how we might break some of that down and what different things there are involved. Now, obviously, I've shown you a little picture, and the architects have gone into a little bit more detail than just that. So there's lots of other little bits and pieces and ideas and thoughts out there, which I've not shared with you. But again, do ask anyone who's on the building development group about those things. We're happy to talk about what ideas they are. But I would like to stress again, they really are just ideas at this stage, and we're going to be taking that forward as we go forward this year. And then finally, I put funds, question mark, because that is the big question mark for us. You know, a big building knocked through like that and putting the glass doors in and doing everything that we think might be brilliant, actually that's going to cost, you know, not a small amount of money. So we need to think about how much we think we want to commit to that, and whether those things are the right, you know, whether we're going to get good value for money in doing everything that we dream might be good. Any questions? Becca?
One of the things that came up on the survey was putting in small rooms for meetings, and there weren't any of those on the plans.
Yes.
Because I was
Yes.
thinking we were going to put rooms in for kids groups
Yes.
and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and a youth space. Is there any thought?
There were some thoughts for smaller rooms, yeah. So obviously we're freeing up the office, so that would create a space that's potentially usable. We also talked about creating a small room just here off of the Lowry. So at the moment, if you go right out of here, you end up in no man's land, and there's actually a space there that we might be able to put something. I think in our minds we're probably slightly smaller rooms than what you're thinking about, so more like sort of meeting rooms and counselling rooms. But yes, I think in fact if I go back, show some of that. So yeah, a little room here, and then another room here, which would be basically out into that space. And then the other thing that they talked about was building some spaces, you know, looking at making this space more flexible. Again, that doesn't necessarily fit with children's groups, but making different spaces
So
work
like going
for people.
upstairs to it?
We
Like
have,
going
yes.
on top of the Lowry,
Yes.
and mezzanine and
We did talk a lot about whether we put a second two-storey space in this space, but again, it seems unclear whether that's a good idea in terms of value for money. Yes?
I'm looking at the large number 2 there, the entrance area, and I'm thinking, to me, working in the kitchen, we could do with more space in the kitchen. So what actually would the purpose be of an area that looks to me almost the same size as the Lowry room?
Yeah. Okay, so just to say about kitchens, if we were going to go back to this here, okay, if you look at the kind of what people said about wanting kitchen facilities, was really kind of quite low down on people's priorities.
With respect, can I say
Yeah.
that the questionnaire went to people who don't work in the kitchen?
Well, it went to everybody,
So
but I understand, yeah.
people that work in there, and we do quite a lot of catering. So
Indeed.
I'm not sure that is really.
I mean, it's not necessarily possible to do everything, but I think, you know, exploring whether to make the kitchen bigger is worth doing.
Especially if you're going to.
There you go. The kitchen is bigger. I'm being told the kitchen is bigger anyway. So if you look at that red line, that's where it currently is.
So where's the kitchen plan to go out to?
So currently it's there on that red line, so that is where the new line would be. So it's kind of maybe an extra 40%. So there you go, I've forgotten.
So how do you see the large entrance areas that are being used?
Well, I think it's a way of routing people through the building and directing people and welcoming people, so that most people look to come in this way. One of the things that we find is that, I mean, I certainly found this when I arrived at some place, where is the entrance? How do you get into the building? And that's not hugely clear. And part of what the architects would look to do is to perhaps do something in the outside space that enables us to understand how we get into the building. And that's for us and for hirers and for anyone coming, so that the landscaping, the signage and everything points towards one good entrance that we would generally tend to come in. And that is an entrance where there's space to move, and it's a lobby, exactly. And you know, we could put a little welcome desk type thing in there. There's lots of ways we could use that.
When you've got the bar open,
Yeah, exactly. People standing around the bar. It's often a crowded area. At Toddlers, it's full of, you know, push chairs, and actually that creates much more space for people to be able to move around. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Has any thought been given to the fact that very often the choir has to take their road to another big coast because the Lowry has a book?
Well, one of the things
If
we...
there would just be a room where we can hang rows,
Yes.
put lockers for music.
Well, certainly if the office is due to move out of here, then that would potentially mean that the old choir vestry, which is now the office, could once again be the choir vestry, potentially. It's an idea.
We don't want to use the choir vestry.
Sorry?
We don't want to use that as a choir vestry particularly.
Okay.
We always did use it, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very damp on that outside wall.
I would imagine if the building steam are coming in, it's not going to be as damp anymore. Part of what we'd want to do is sort the walls out, put a new surface on them so that everything is working. Sorry?
At least can it be considered?
Yes. I mean, certainly all of these are just thoughts at the moment, so we've not fixed anything down, but this is an ongoing process of talking and thinking and making stuff happen. Yes, Joe?
I was just going to say, in amongst all these wonderful big spaces and new entrances and different offices and bigger kitchens and more community, is there still actually going to be somewhere that is a quiet space that I can walk into when I'm troubled and sit and be quiet and not listen to Zumba lessons or all the other things that are going on and just have a quiet space?
Yeah, certainly, good question. Joe's asking about whether there's still quiet spaces in church. Joe, I'm assuming that you mean today, currently you would use the church for that, or would you use somewhere else?
Yes, no, I would come in and
Yeah.
perhaps sit in the lady chapel or
And so
just sit somewhere where it's quiet.
and that isn't going to change necessarily. Yeah. It is fair to say that we are looking to be able to use the church space for multi-purpose, so that does mean at times perhaps there will be other things in there, but that's not really any different to today where there are already some groups using that space. But no, we're not planning to make this such a way that the church is closed and people can't go in and sit down and have quiet. And the Lady Chapel, there's no intention to sort of destroy that in some way, although I know that's not clear from the architect's plans. Yes.
Do all these plans include basic things like electricity rewiring?
Yes, essentially. Insulation, rewiring, new heating, things that cost us a small fortune to do are all kind of part and parcel with it, but they're the kind of things that need doing, but they're not the kind of attractive things that we need to think through in any great detail. It's sort of a given.
You know, lights get left on in the toilets when there's nobody here. We could, obviously do with lights that are movement controlled.
Yes, sensor lights, those kinds of things. And I think that's part of the reason why we wanted that environmental impact part of it, so that we can hold the architects to account when we get to that stage. But a lot of those kinds of things are small details that get worked out once we get the ball rolling with the bigger vision and picture of it.
It's in there.
Yeah. Yes?
A couple of questions. Between the Bulson and the church on the exit behind you, there's a weird circle that thing.
That's,
That
I
needs to
think,
be a table.
table and chairs, yeah.
Also, one of the main things that I have or struggle with the building at the moment is lack of storage. Like we talked about getting 6 new chairs, and we went, where are we going to put those? Is there any more storage space being made, or just space to have stuff happen?
Yeah, I mean, principally that space between the buildings is relatively narrow. So that, I mentioned that these would be storage spaces, and also this space here would be, there's lots of different things going on there, but that's not massively changed. But if we are losing that loo there, then that would create more space as well.
Okay.
Yes, Nigel.
Is it possible to have this plan printed out with an index? Because I'm sure that a lot of people would be very interested.
Yeah.
Because it's something that needs a bit of study, isn't
Yeah.
it?
I think Roland's quite keen to answer that, but I think the answer would be no.
Basically, each of the focus groups are shown that drawing. Bear in mind, it's just as a talking point, not exactly what's going to happen. So printing it out and indexing it will
Exactly, thank you.
Because what we need is feedback on that, and we're doing that through the focus groups with the 3 different slips.
Yeah, and I'll repeat that. Just what we don't want to do is to tell you this is what we're doing. That's not what I want you to take away from this. What I want you to take away is we've listened, we've thought, we've talked to architects. Here's some of the big ideas that we might do. Now let's talk about it some more and figure out exactly what that's going to look like. Okay? Because we don't want to rush into something super expensive and make it just the first thing that the architect suggests. But actually, we want to really think this through. Yes, Roland?
So some of the points that have been raised in context of what your city's look like have been recorded in the 2 focus group meetings, like wall space, storage, all that have been picked up in the 2 groups we've had. So they're on record and they will form part of our consideration.
Okay, so if you picked up on that, what he's saying is we're doing these focus groups. They are there to try and get some of this information fed back. And this plan will evolve and change. What I'm doing today is just keeping you guys in the loop about what our thinking is and where we're going with this, so that at every stage you know where we are at and what's happening. Because it is a project that takes a long time, and I don't want anyone to just think, well, what are they doing? There's nothing happening. There are things happening, it just happens underground a lot. So this is just to show you that we're thinking some things through, we're talking to people, and that plan is ongoing.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes. Shall we keep
There was a
last
couple
one?
of things about glass doors, and they're definitely not on that plan.
Yes, although they have been discussed. Yeah.
Well, yes, but clearly,
Parts
if
of
a
the
focus
reason is
group
that
like this saw it, they wouldn't raise it and realise.
I think a big part of that was that we talked a lot with the architect about the space at the back of church, and possibly putting in a mezzanine there and meeting rooms for children and so on. And we didn't land anywhere happy with that, which is why we've taken it to focus groups. But if we did put some space in there, then there wouldn't be much point in having glass doors there, because you'd look into some space that's sealed off, so it becomes problematic.
I got quite a bit of positive feedback on glass doors. That was
Yes, absolutely.
what I saw.
But it's glass doors so that we can see into church. But if you're going to put another room at the back behind those doors, then you'd see into the room and not into church. So that's the only reason they're not sort of in the plans, because it's all up for discussion. Good. I think I'm going to hand back to Paul. I know there's lots of questions, but we are very much over time. So
Thanks, Mike. That's brilliant. Thank you. That is intended just to tell you where we're at. That is not what we're doing. That is not the plan. That is just to tell you where the building development group has got to and what our next steps are. Obviously, if they become concrete plans, the PCC will want to talk about that, and then we'll want to share that with the wider church community. So, we really do need to end. Thank you for your patience. Before we do anything, we're going to pray in a moment. But Cliff, do you want to say something?
This afternoon we've been reflecting over the past year, and it's quite apparent that this is an extremely busy church, and an awful lot of people are involved in making that work. That doesn't happen by accident. It needs leadership. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Paul, despite being away for 3 months, done an awful lot of work this last year. So thank you, Paul, for leading us so well.
Thank you. Let's pray, shall we? Let's pray this prayer together. Heavenly Father, as we look to the future, we seek your vision for our church community. Guide us in our decisions and strengthen our resolve to be a beacon of hope and love in our community. May we follow your path and embrace the opportunities ahead. Amen.